I am CJ Werleman, and this is episode number 6 of Foreign Object. For those of you tuning in for the first time, you might want to know why Foreign Object. Well, clearly the first clue is my strange sounding accent, but as one of my critics rightfully teased, I'm like a dildo uncomfortably wedged in America's butthole. And this show is all about America, at least as it's seen through the eyes of a dildo. That would be me. The topic of today's episode is how the New Age focus of self has retarded real social movements in America. In Aldous Huxley's fictitious and futuristic Brave New World, the director of Central London Hatchery and Conditioning Centre says, and that is the secret of happiness and virtue, liking what you've got to do. All conditioning aims at that, making people like their unescapable social destiny. In this dystopian Brave New World, the citizenry values conformity above all else, and given it is easy to control a happy populace, the government uses propaganda and conditioning to manipulate people into feeling positive and happy about their lot in life. Happiness is used to pacify the people, which allows the state to enrich the ruling elite while allowing government officials to break laws without consequence. So how does this apply to America today? Well, if you're paying attention, the answer should be obvious. America is on its way to becoming a failed state. And by failed state, I mean a third world nation that is divided between a ruling class and a class of economic serfs, and nothing much left in the middle. This has not happened by accident. It has happened because America has become, as Harvard professor Sheldon Wallen described, a corporate totalitarian state. The puzzle to me is the lack of social unrest, Wallen says. That missing piece to this puzzle may be the one that says self-delusion is what keeps people from questioning the power structures around them that are responsible for their misery and plight. To help discuss this phenomenon of collective passivity, I am pleased to welcome investigative reporter Steve Salerno. In 2005, Steve published an investigation into the self-help industry. Titled Sham, How the Self-Help Movement Made America Helpless, the book ignited widespread skepticism of self-help and made Salerno the go-to guy whenever other members of the media needed a quote about this or that self-help guru or program. In 2010, he collaborated with ABC senior correspondent and weekend anchor Dan Harris on an hour-long primetime expose on the movement. The show examined self-help through the lens of the Sedona tragedy, which took the lives of 3 New Agers who paid $10,000 apiece to the parboiled during James Arthur Ray's ill-conceived sweat lodge ceremony. And with that, Steve, welcome to the show. How are you, mate?
I am doing fine, CJ. I just don't know how I can possibly say anything that rises to the imagery of a dildo in America's butthole.
I know. I didn't want to write that, but I couldn't resist.
I'm intimidated right off the bat. But thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to finally meet you voice to voice.
Yeah, mate. No, it's good to finally have a chat. I know we've been following each other on Twitter for a long period of time, and mate, I welcome this opportunity to sit down and have a lengthy discussion with you, and particularly as this is something which is directly in your wheelhouse. How the psychobabble industry and how the new age of power of positive thinking has led Americans to believe they can change their circumstances in life by just thinking positive but without actually enacting any social movement. So,
well, you made a statement in your open, CJ, that I think really cuts to the heart of everything I was trying to accomplish in the book. And if you've been to my blog, which, by the way, can I plug, is shamblog.com, you'll see that I try to widen the lens to look at how self-help and its mindset infects other aspects of society. And you said the lack of social unrest. Part of the lack of social unrest stems from the fact that for about 2 generations now, we've been conditioning people, and it starts right in the schools with the self-esteem movement, to think that it's all about them. So, you're not going to have the empathy that you normally would have for somebody else's plight, and you're not going to look to make the connections that you would normally have made unless you see some tangible way that those connections benefit you. And you will see a definite, over the last generation, a retrenchment of what used to be major social movements into more of this climate of narcissism that you alluded to, where people really only do it if they can see a direct benefit, and they've been conditioned by the new age to think that that's perfectly fine because it really is all about you.
Yeah, mate, you've hit the nail on the head, and that's what I think it was Susan Jacoby. She wrote in the Age of American Unreason She said that the gimmick of visualizing what we want and believing that we can achieve it is no different to praying to God or Jesus, who we are told wants to make us wealthy and successful.
Right, right.
And is that how you see the?
And if you go back to the codependency movement, which once upon a time in this country, women were staying in marriages that they never should have stayed in. I think we all agree with this. And they were staying with husbands who were downright abusive. They were either emotionally or physically abusive, and yet the women stayed because they felt they had no options. So along comes the codependency movement, which is supposed to address that. This was one of the earliest planks of self-help. And the codependency movement, like most social movements or most New Age movements, it always overcorrects. So what it told women basically is you don't have to worry about anybody else's emotions but your own. Don't worry if your children are going to be hurt if you leave. Don't worry if your husband's going to be furious if you leave. Just worry about how you feel. And from that one plank of self-help, which was this idea that you should not worry so much about how other people are feeling, that fed into this whole climate of where, again, I hate to keep repeating myself, but it reinforces this notion that if you feel victimized, if you feel like you're not meeting your goals, and basically the hell with how it affects other people. And I think a lot of the things we see in society stem from that.
And what role has, let's throw some high profile names out there, what role has Oprah played?
Well, she's the enabler. I mean, she's the eminence grise. It hasn't happened in self-help if she didn't have a personal hand. There have been gurus like Marianne Williamson, Dr. Laura, who were Dr. Phil, of course, who were nobodies until they did her show, and then overnight they became one-person industries. And if you're on Oprah's show, you get this imprimatur that your work automatically has heft, it has meaning, it has gravitas. So you take that book a few years ago, The Secret, and I've written extensively about this in the Wall Street Journal and other magazines. The Secret preached this notion that if you just visualize it, if you send the right vibes out into the universe, the beneficent universe will reward you. And just think about it, and it will come to you. Now, that's destructive on several levels. First of all, we used to actually put people in institutions for thinking things like that, that if you just send out the right vibes, the universe will send it to you.
Sure. And
it undervalues everything that we have preached in this society. And I know America's taken a lot of hits lately, and your open about America, is rather cynical.
Yeah.
Maybe more cynical than I myself would be. But at least once upon a time, we used to value hard work. That if you want to achieve something, you work hard at it. At least you have a shot. At least you're in the game. You take a book like The Secret, if you tell people, just send out the right images, the right vibes, and it will come to you. Where is the reverence for hard work, for dotting your I's and crossing your T's, to use an old-fashioned idiom. But we're sending out all of these messages that are generating, as of last year, $13 billion is what the New Age industry is worth in what it generates. And it's preaching people to do everything the opposite of what we always told them to do in order to be successful.
That's interesting. And coming to cynicism, poverty, and just to illustrate, I guess the difference in the way that Australians, by and large, look in poverty compared to Americans, by and large, that, there's a tendency in healthy liberal democracies to see poverty as a condition of structural issues within an economy, but American, with the overzealousness of the Christian theology, particularly the prosperity theology, which says the most righteous will be rewarded.
And we see how that works, huh?
Yeah, but Americans have a very for lack of a better term, individualistic. That's that rugged individualism, that American frontierman. Which is very much part of the American psyche. But that translates into Americans blaming the individual for their plight rather than blaming the circumstance or the structural or the social, the societal causes, whether that's, deunionization, free trade policies, stagnant level wages, poverty level wages, and so forth. Speak to that a little bit.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many listeners are into sports very much. There is a sports figure in America who's beloved, Tommy Lasorda. For many years was the manager of the Dodgers. And he still says to this day that when he bleeds Dodger blue. I attended a speech for which Tommy Lasorda was paid $1,000 a minute, $50,000 for 50 minutes he was on stage. And his message came down to the same thing again and again. You got to want it. The person who wins is the person who wants it the most. But that's not so bad. But let's look at the converse of that and how it applies to what you just said. It implies that if you lose, it's because you didn't want it. So here again, we're sending out this message, whether we intend to or not, that if you're a quote-unquote a failure in life, if you're poor, if you're downtrodden, it's because of you. It's because of some defect, some moral defect inside you that prevented you from achieving, what the president of General Motors achieved or something like that. We keep sending out these messages. You can have everything you want if you try hard enough. And if you don't have everything you want, it's because you're a no-good damn failure and you don't have the proper ethics and values to be successful. And I think that's very dangerous both ways in terms of the social structure that you described.
And the celebrity culture has to play in that as well. Not only is there a sense that Americans, as John Steinbeck said, the temporarily embarrassed millionaire in waiting, but the reality TV shows have kind of convinced Americans that their time is going to come, that their star is going to shine, and that encourages this reluctance to create social unrest, to push back against the corporate state, which has eradicated the wealth of the middle class or transferred middle class wealth to the top.
I don't even think that when I was growing up, I remember I asked my father when I was a young boy. I went into my father's room one day as he was getting dressed for work. I said to him, "Dad, are you happy?" And he said to me, "Son, a man doesn't have time to think about those things." That might have been a little harsh and austere, but I think the point he was trying to get to was that life is about taking care of business. And also to my father, it was about taking care of the wider family. I mean, we knew all the people on the block that we lived with. We were involved in local community events. You don't see that to the same degree anymore now, CJ, like you're talking about. There isn't the social structure there used to be. There isn't the concern that we're leaving all these people behind that I think that we say there is. We're very good with lip service, but you don't see it translated into the effort, into the programs, into the rethinking of the way the social structure should be in order to serve these people and make them happy.
And who are the biggest culprits in perpetuating the myth of self-help?
Well, it's funny. I did a CNN show with our friend Anderson Cooper, and I debated against the guy who is really the entrepreneur behind all the chicken soup books, the chicken soup for the soul, and all that. And we got into a debate about Dr. Laura. I think that Dr. Laura, for all of her good quote-unquote motives, has been one of the most destructive forces in the society because she's so damn judgmental. But, her star has fallen a lot in recent years. But this is a woman, the hypocrisy of it. She preaches family values, family values. This is a woman who didn't even know that her own mother was dead for almost 2 months while she lay in a condo in Beverly Hills. And this is documented. And I know, maybe it's just me, but I think that the first family value, or certainly at least a second, is know when your mother is dead. You know what I mean? Like to me, that should be up there. So again, and of course, she's Dr. Laura, but it's a PhD in physiology, which really makes her closer to being a gym teacher than a family counselor. So, there's a lot of things that I'm sort of constrained to say because I'm out from under the umbrella coverage of my publisher.
Sure.
So we have to be a little bit careful. But a lot of people are out there putting out this message that they have the answer to everything. But again, to your point, to bring it back, and I think it's really an excellent point. It's this culture of the message that's preached over and over again is the culture of narcissism that undercuts everything that people like you or myself might try to do to get people to care empathically about a wider issue than just what's going on underneath their own roof.
Yeah, indeed. I was reading. Have you read much of Chris Hedges' work?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and he was in his book Empire of Illusion. He talks about the cult of self, and and I'll just read you a passage that I had prepared for knowing we we're going to have this chat. And he said, "The cult of self dominates our cultural landscape. The cult has within its classic traits of psychopaths: superficial charm, grandiosity and self-importance, a need for constant stimulation, a penchant for lying, deception and manipulation, and the inability to feel remorse or guilt. This, of course, the ethic promoted by corporations. It is the ethic of unfettered capitalism. It is the misguided belief that personal style and personal advancement, mistaken for individualism, are the same as democratic equality."
Right, and I have been to corporate training seminars to that point where I have heard corporate motivators tell an audience of 200 people that they can all be the president of their division by the next year. Now, that's logically impossible. I mean, there will be one president, but we have corporate trainers coming in, and it's like you said, it's almost like a mass psychosis where we're so caught up in our own future, we're so caught up in the moment that we can have somebody tell a room full of people they can all be number one, and we don't even question it. We just go along with the program, and we become the little sheep that are just led to slaughter by the people who we're really working for, which is the top dogs, the 1%.
Yep. Did any of these New Age gurus come after you?
In the very beginning, Tony Robbins, who of course is Guru One, he's the Don Corleone of Guru.
Yeah.
But he threatened to file an injunction to get the book so that stores would not stock the book. And fortunately, I was writing for Random House, which of course at the time was the biggest publisher in America, and their legal team basically told him to go away, go amuse yourself. We're publishing this damn book. So he tried to get us to stifle ourselves, and we went ahead and published it anyway. And I've had there's one other now that's in the background that's going after me for something I said on the blog, which I really can't get into. But people from time to they're very, very touchy, and for all of this mantra that they put about exploration and asking questions and putting the vibes out there, they certainly don't seem to like it when people ask questions of them. They get very, very touchy.
Yeah, and well, tell us something. Can you tell us something juicy about Anthony Robbins?
Let's just say this. Every year around Valentine. Oh, all right. Wait, I got a better one for you. Let me back up.
Okay.
Tony once put out a DVD series that was called "How to Keep the Magic in Your Relationship." Uh-huh. And you could tell by the way that it was structured and everything. The whole point of this was like, let's assume that you're in a relationship that's, maybe 10, 15 years old. We all kind of, the honeymoon period is over. You want to eliminate the staleness and keep it exciting and vibrant. So he's putting out this series, How to Keep the Magic in Your Relationship, at the very same time that he personally is swapping wife number one for wife number two. So, it's kind of like an irony there. And there's this hypocrisy that runs through, do what I say, not what I do, that runs through so much of self-help. And I was tempted to say to Tony, if I'd ever met him, Tony, how come you couldn't keep the magic in your marriage? I mean, why did you have to go to somebody else in order to be happy? So, but you see stories like that all throughout self-help, all of these little hypocrisies.
Mate, he's like the Newt Gingrich of the self-help movement.
Well, you said that, I didn't. But you'll hear from Tony. But
I guess
you mentioned corporations. So I just want to make this point before I forget. The kind of corporate training that I was talking about with Tommy Lasorda, where they have these glamour speakers come in, and there's a lot of them now, a lot of famous basketball players. If you've achieved anything in sports, you have a career waiting for you after your sports days are over doing motivational speaking. This is something that corporate America invested close to $200 billion in last year, and it is never tracked. It is never tracked. The people come in, they make their speeches, they get paid $100,000, $200,000. They put out all of these programs, and of course, every year's new program contradicts last year's previous program, and they never track results. There is no effort made to track this now. And meanwhile, if you work in the accounting department and you're some lower level peon, and you use 3 more pencils than your allotment, you'll hear about it and potentially get docked. So there's all this money spent at the highest levels to bring in these glamour speakers, and they don't care how much they spend to get the right name. And yet throughout the bowels of the corporation, to go back to your dildo in the butthole reference, they're so hard on everybody. Productivity, show me the cost benefit equation, and it's that two tiers of the way they operate. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, no, that's good. It also makes me think about the CNN documentary which came out this week, Ivory Tower, which examined the tertiary education system as it is in America today, and I think it's so illustrative of the pervasiveness of the corporate state and what the cynical dystopian future that I outlined in my introduction, that these kids now are coming out of college with $180,000, $200,000 student debts.
Right.
Now, the unemployment rate for fresh graduates in this country under the age of 25 years of age is almost 50%. So you have this $200,000 debt, you're faced with 50% unemployment rate, and most of these kids end up working at Starbucks. So, because that's all the jobs that are left in this economy now, thanks to free trade and outsourcing and so forth, that, we have to pay the corporate state $200,000 to get an education, and we come out of it with a job that, serves is only...
Well, I taught in journalism at Indiana University, which is a huge school in Indiana, which renowned for its journalism department. And to this day, I have students who are doing the kinds of things you were talking about. They're waiting tables, they're baristas, however you call it, and they try to write or get a little low-level, freelance copy editing job whenever they can. So we've got all. If I can just turn this around for 1 second.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Steve?
Yeah.
There's a lot of debate now about, is college for everybody? I'm curious, based on what you were saying, what you think about that. Is there a large segment you think really shouldn't waste its money going to college? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I know there's that huge non-college movement, and there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are paying for, who are giving out grants, up to six-figure numbers for kids to come up with business models or new business applications instead of going to college. I guess I'm fundamentally opposed to that. I just think that's more pervasiveness of that's just basically just outsourcing education to corporations.
Yeah.
I believe we need to go the opposite way, and that's we need to corporations are now paying the lowest percentage of total federal tax revenue to the federal government in America's history, and that's forcing state governments and to cut funding to these state universities, and these budget shortfalls within these schools are being filled, with rising and escalating tuition fees, which are risen 1,000%. I just believe any society that can't deliver education and healthcare as a basic fundamental human right is on the wrong track. In Germany now, they'll give university education free of charge, even if you're not from Germany. And this, the same in Japan, and so America is going to have to compete in a global economy where not only is university going to be made unaffordable, but it's once they get into these universities, these universities are sold as products where these kids are just there to party. It's non-academic based subjects. That basically at the end of it, all they come out is the tools to be a middle manager for the corporate state.
Or maybe they can be lucky and they can be part of a layout of like Playboy's The Girls of Ohio State or something like that, and they have something to be proud of.
Yeah, I think that's Arizona State.
They'll get that's right, their own celebrity moment.
Yeah.
I was just curious because I look at the statistics, and I mean I was watching a CNN discussion of this just the other night, and one of their commentators was very incensed by the whole idea that some people shouldn't go to college, because she intuited a strong racist undercurrent to that, that there's this underclass of people that we need to train to be carpenters or whatever, plumbers, and they're not going to be credentialed people like quote unquote the white aristocracy was, I think, the way she put it. But I don't know, I have mixed emotions about that. But just having taught in several different college institutions, I see an awful lot of waste, CJ. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of waste, and as you said, the indebtedness. If you're really going to pay it back, which not everybody does, but it takes you an awful lot of time to get back in the black,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's stopping, that kind of debt. I mean, university in Australia is free
Hmm.
technically, but you pay for it at the end. It comes out of what's called a HEX debt.
Hmm.
So, you basically don't feel it until your income hits a certain level, and then it's sort of garnished out of your taxes. But it's not an interest. It doesn't bear interest. It's not some not unlike student debt in the US. You can't untie yourself from it. These
Yeah,
kids are
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
these kids are gonna end up passing these debts down to their children, and it's also going to stop them participating in the economy because they're never going to be able to afford a home or a mortgage
No, that's true. That's
with
true.
that kind of debt. And
I guess my biggest concern about education is I still see vestiges. I mean, we've backed away from self-esteem based education a little bit here. I don't know how it was in Australia.
mm,
I know it wasn't that pervasive in the UK when I spoke to some people on a show over there, but we train people from the earliest age to think you're wonderful, you're special, you're perfect. At least we did as of, say, 15, 20 years ago. And if you tell a child that he or she is wonderful and special, and they know that they're not doing wonderful and special work, they learn to think of, they have a self-opinion that is totally divorced from what their actual capabilities are. And I used to see this in college. If I gave somebody a C plus, they'd react as if I set fire to their hair. I mean, there is such a climate of escalating expectations. We had, where I live now, we had a young woman who sued Lehigh. I was adjuncting in Lehigh for a semester. She didn't sue me, thankfully, but she sued the school because she got a C, and the C prevented her from getting into an advanced program. She sued the school for the value of her future livelihood that she felt she was denied by virtue of having gotten the subpar grade. She had to get a B or above to move on in the curriculum. I mean, and that to me is the danger culturally of
yeah.
telling everybody that they're wonderful and special automatically by fiat. I mean, it's like, could you do something first and then we'll tell you you're good, rather than just telling you that, imbuing you with that as standard equipment?
I've lived in 4 countries, and I've travelled I think through 19 or 20 different countries now,
Wow.
and I think what separates the American parent from parents everywhere else in the world is far too much positive reinforcement, and
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
and I see it with my daughter. She's in grade 8 here in California,
Mhm.
and you know these parents they're like helicopters. They
Yeah.
fly above their parents, constantly telling their kids how good and special they are. And you see this manifest itself like when you watch an episode of, say, American Idol, and
Right,
this
right. Oh, yeah.
contestant who has absolutely no chops, no singing chops, no singing skills, and she's
Right.
absolutely devastated when she's told by the judges that she has no talent because her parents have been telling her whole life that how wonderful and how special and how she's going to change the world and so forth. I heard a stand-up comic say years ago in Australia, and he said the difference between American parenting and Australian parenting is this. In America, when an American parent is teaching their child how to swim, the dad stands waist deep in the pool, and little Johnny's standing on the edge of the pool, and the dad's going, "Come on, little Johnny, you can do it. Just jump in, and once you jump in, you're going to be the best little swimmer in the world. You can do it. All you do is make that first step." The Australian parent, Australian dad is standing in the pool waist deep holding a beer, and the son is standing on the edge. The Australian dad gives a look to his son and says, "What are you, gay?"
That's funny. Yeah. Maybe
So,
we need a little bit more of that. But I have gotten papers back. I don't want to exaggerate. I got
yeah,
2 of them. I mean, let's see. I've taught 19 semesters altogether as of now in various schools. I've gotten papers back where I made my corrections on a paper and I sent it back, and then I got a second submission to me that had 2 sets of queries on it, color coded. One was from the student, and one was from the student's parent, wanting to know how I had the audacity to take issue with the obviously transcendental logic that little Susie or Johnny put into this paper. So it is. I mean, I think that parents should learn to cut the cord at least by second year of college. I hope you agree with me.
yeah, mate, absolutely. We've got 19-year-old son who's already flowing the coop, so I've got one down, one to go. I can see the finish line.
That's good.
Yeah, but I think it was the philosopher, and I've lost his name. had made a Jopling, who said that this belief that we're instilling, this special, self-deluding ourselves, has the pernicious effect of forcing us to blame ourselves when everything goes wrong, blaming us for our predicament. When we fall short of fame and adulation, we sink into depression. And he's a philosopher, and I thought that was a pretty good, strong argument for rising tide of depression. I know depression is a chemical, is a clinical thing, but it's also psychological depression as well.
Depression and suicide. I mean, I think that you see a lot of things. You're going to reach a stage where you realize that the world is not quite ready to fall at your feet the way your parents and teachers have. And I think it can be a very difficult adjustment for some people that when they run up against reality and realize that not everybody's going to give them A's for everything they do,
But so how do we find the balance? What is the balance between having a strong self-esteem and high self-worth, but also having a realistic expectation?
Now you're asking me for answers. See, that's the tough part. Nobody's ever asked me for answers. I'll tell you a funny story that my agent suggested me. Very early on in the life cycle of sham, my agent said to me, "Hey, why don't we put a final chapter in there?" And the final chapter would be something like, "Okay, we've told you about all this other stuff that doesn't work. Now here's some of the stuff that does." And I thought about that. Now, the book probably would have sold. It did okay, but it probably would have been an absolute unbelievable bestseller if I'd put that last chapter in there. But then I would have been the same as everybody else. I would have been another one of these, poor man's gurus knocking down everybody else's program so that I could give my own answers. And that's the tough part, CJ. I mean, the only thing I can say is maybe it's age-related. Maybe positive reinforcement is really important when you're a child, although there are studies that rebut that as well. And maybe as you get a little older in life, we phase in more of this, it's not all about you. Maybe you're not the best thing in the world. Maybe you need to look at helping some other people. It's very tough for me as someone who's been so immersed in all the negatives of self-help to rise above it and think about how we make it a prescriptive. The only thing I can tell you is that when I was doing the piece you alluded to for ABC, these gurus and all of the top figures in self-help, they sell the message that this stuff is incredibly potent. It's incredibly powerful. It can transform your life in a weekend, which is what the guru said who managed to kill those people out in Arizona. And yet, simultaneously, it has no harmful aspects to it. Now, think about that for a moment. Think about the drugs that we use in this society. Is it possible simultaneously for a drug to be incredibly powerful in changing everything you see in life, and yet not conceivably have some horrific side effects for some people who are going to end up killing themselves or going way off the deep end, which, by the way, is exactly what we do see with the powerful psychoactive drugs like Prozac and some of the others. You see this long laundry list of possible side effects of things that may happen to you. All I can say is that anything that is as powerful as some of these things that the self-help gurus claim to train you in also has a downside that we need to be very careful of. And my only recommendation that I used to give when I did radio all the time was, if you really feel you have problems, at least go to somebody who's credentialed. Go to a psychologist, go to a psychiatrist. Don't go to Dr. Phil or Tony Robbins, because a one-size push-button, one-size-fits-all program is only going to work for the people with the most generic problems. We're all individuals. We all need individual solutions.
I mean, these people have millions of followers around the world. So what do you say to somebody who said, well, it says to you that, okay, well, Tony Robbins turned my life around. Tony's book, Waken the Giant Within, that was instrumental in changing my life.
Well, first of all, Tony is not one of the worst offenders. There are some things in Tony's regimen that are actionable. In other words, and I'll give you an example. He says one thing you'll notice about the people who get the most Now, let me research. First of all, excuse me because I'm a little bit asthmatic, so I'm like gulping for breath here at times, but I'm doing the best I can.
Good on you, mate.
Tony says the people who get the best information are the people who ask the best questions. If you want to get better information that you can actually use, learn to ask better questions. Now, I have no objection to specific prescriptions like that. And look, every program is going to help somebody. Like I had people call in screaming when I did radio shows and say, "You're saying it never helps anybody. You're crazy." Like you said, this program has turned my life around. There's going to be something that helps everyone. But these programs have never been validated in any kind of a meaningful way. They're generally taught by people who have no credentials in mental arts. They were basically salespeople who evolved to a very high level. They have side effects and possible dangers. And I think we just need to keep that in perspective. Can I give you one more example?
Yeah, go for it.
There's a guy named Beck Weathers I mentioned in the book. He decides to go up and climb Mount Everest. He's got no real experience. He hires a guide. He has no idea what he's doing up there on the mountain. He gets lost. He can't find his way back to base camp. He freezes out in the cold. He loses various body parts. He almost dies. He almost gets other people killed who have to come up to rescue him. And do you know that he comes down off the mountain after having various parts of himself amputated? And now he does motivational speeches for $25,000 an hour telling people how to survive the obstacles in their life. I mean, this is a guy who almost got killed, almost got a half dozen other people killed, and we make some kind of an expert out of him and how to manage our lives. It's ridiculous. I mean, and we will take inspiration from almost anybody. The Kardashians, for Christ's sake. It's like, yeah, it's mind-numbing.
That's the cult of celebrity.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know why there's this idea that all of this stuff can translate from one person to another. It just did because Kim Kardashian has been successful in merchandising herself just for the sake of being famous and having made a sex tape once upon a time. How does that translate to you if you want to learn how to be a better teacher or a better carpenter or a better anything else? I just don't get it. Frankly, I'm mystified by it. Even as much as I've written about it and studied it, I'm mystified by what makes that resonate in people. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, that celebrity culture now is so omnipotent that it's we've become so obsessed with the trivia, a celebrity and political debate, and you watch it on cable news now. There is no substance or any political discourse anymore. It's pure trivia, and it's gossip. We talk about political debates in the same way we gossip about Hollywood actors or who's dating who. It's which politician is wearing what or dating who or what sex scandal they're involved in. It's and no one really engages. They don't really. It's not a matter of listening to the other guy's evidence and assessing it and seeing if that changes the framework you had going in. People only listen long enough until they can seize upon something to rebut or that gives them an opening to scream their point, the point that they want to make. And which actually brings me to a subject near and dear to your heart, which is religion. Because I've been criticized. I've had people say to me, well, if you're going to criticize the New Age, if you're going to criticize self-help, do you also criticize religion? I say, well, maybe that's another book, but CJ's already written it. But the thing is, in large parts of religion, at least the one quote-unquote benefit is they're not extracting large sums of money from you regularly. Right. I mean, you could nitpick that point, but I don't have to pay $10,000 to go to church like I have to go to the church of James Arthur Ray, So at least in that sense, like self-help is a kind of religion. It's a religion of philosophy, but at least at least the real religion, quote unquote, is generally free. It's just between you and God, and I don't get into that area too much. But sure, no, mate, that's interesting, mate. It's we've now hit time. What's the best place people to buy your book? Is that Amazon? I already put a link.
Go to Amazon. They can go to my blog if they want to actually see some of my strange reasoning on subjects besides self-help and how it applies generally. So yeah, Amazon.com is the place to go.
Okay, and sorry, and your blog address again?
It's shamblog.com, SHAMBLOG.com.
Okay, no, that's terrific, Steve. Mate, it's mate, you've been
CJ, thank you so much for being patient with me, and I did the best I could, man, and I wish you well.
Mate, you struggled very well, mate. I didn't even notice that you're struggling with asthma. So, mate, I wish you all the best. It's been awesome having you on the show, mate.
Thanks a lot, CJ. You take care of yourself.
Yeah, you too. Get better.
Bye.
Thanks, mate.